We are at the fourth rule now, and this rule pertains to denying a hadith. So this is once again a very important rule, because this case is not clear for a lot of people. Some people think denying a hadith is blasphemy. Well, it could be. It's possible to be. But denying a hadith is not like denying the Quran. Also, it's not like denying the definitive mental judgment. Let's look. What do we have in terms of religious evidence? Al-Quran. Denying the Quran is blasphemy. Denying a single letter of the Quran is blasphemy. Of course, knowing that that's Quran. We have hadiths. That's what we're going to talk about today. We have consensus. We already talked about denying the consensus. It's not a rule that denying the consensus is blasphemy. Rather, in this realm here, denying what's known in the religion by necessity is blasphemy. But the matters of consensus are two categories: those that are known in the religion by necessity and those that are not. Consensus means no difference in opinion. One saying over all scholars. And of course, denying something that there's difference in opinion about it is not blasphemy. And I just told you, denying the definitive mental judgment is blasphemy, like if someone denies that Allah exists, or which is denying something known in the religion by necessity, or denies that Allah is dissimilar to anything. Or if someone believes that the world has no beginning, that's against definitive intellectual evidence. So then what's the case about denying a hadith here? Going all around that. Yani just for the purpose of comparing here. Comparing denying a hadith to denying other things. Denying a hadith is not like denying the Quran, because denying even a single letter of the Quran is blasphemy. But what's the case of denying a hadith? Let's see what the author says. He says, one does not disbelieve for denying the wording of a successive mass narrated hadith, a mutawatir hadith. Wording meaning phrasing, as opposed to what? As opposed to the meaning, the wording versus the meaning. Here we talk about the wording. Didn't we just say denying a single letter of the Quran is blasphemy? That's concerning its wording. Denying the wording of a hadith is not blasphemy. And you notice here that the Shaykh, he specified a particular kind of hadith to start with or to talk about. The mutawatir hadith, which we will insha'Allah ta'ala explain what that means. But denying a hadith, the wording of a hadith, is not blasphemy. Why? Because the hadiths are not like the Quran, with the meaning that the Quran is the revelation that has been memorized and confirmed from the Prophet letter by letter, without a single letter unaccounted for. That's a case unique to the Muslims. Without a single letter unaccounted for. Because the Muslims memorized the Quran from beginning to end, verbatim. Allah even made it easy for the children to memorize the Quran. There are children who memorize the Quran completely. Allah says, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ. By God, we have made the Quran easy to memorize. Or we swear that we have made the Quran easy to memorize. What does we mean here? We means Allah only. That's what they call royal we. It's not plural. It's royal, not plural. So the Quran is memorized down to the very letter over throughout the countries, throughout the centuries. So it's not the same. As for the hadiths, what's their case? Their case is that they were reported from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam by meaning, mostly by meaning. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave his companions the permission to convey from him by meaning, and they did so. And that's why one hadith could have numerous versions, because different companions would be reporting that according to the meaning, not committing to the exact words that the Prophet said, because he permitted them to do that, alayhi salatu wassalam. What did Imam al-Juwayni say? He said the revelation is made of two parts. A part that needs to be memorized and a part that needs to be understood. He said, if all of it had to be memorized, then it would be too difficult. And if all of it could be merely understood, then it would be lost. And so there's a portion of it that requires memorization and a portion of it that requires only understanding. So the portion that requires memorization, that's the Quran. It's not permissible to change its letters. And the portion of it that's enough to understand, that's the sunnah, the hadiths of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. And he gave an example. He said, if a king had a trusted herald and told him to deliver this message to Fulan and read it exactly as it is, then for him to go and deliver that message to Fulan and read it verbatim without altering anything, he has fulfilled his task. While if the king, on the other hand, didn't task his herald with the exact verbatim wording and told him, go tell Fulan such and such. So he went to him and told him, but in meaning, not verbatim the way the king said it, then he has also fulfilled his task. So the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, just so you know, Prophet Muhammad had the permission to say his hadiths in his own words. The Quran, he was obligated to convey it as it was revealed to him. And the sunnah, he was allowed to say it in his own words. And he allowed his companions to convey from him in meaning or by meaning. So therefore, it's not blasphemy for someone to deny the wording of a hadith. How would it be blasphemy when one fallible person would have reported the Prophet's words in one way and another fallible person would have reported the same hadith in another way? So there's no blasphemy here. And until now, I didn't start talking about mutawatir hadith, which is what the Shaykh mentioned in particular here. I'm just talking about hadiths in general. Yani, denying a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it amounts to denying the report of some people. So that's not blasphemy. If somebody told you something and you didn't accept, it doesn't mean you're a kafir. So he said, one does not disbelieve for denying the wording of a successive mass narrated hadith, a mutawatir hadith. Why he specified this kind, successive mass narrated hadith? Because this kind is 100% authentic, 100% true from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa ala alihi wasallam. Because any mutawatir report is true, not just from the Prophet, from anyone. Like what? Like, how do we know that Hitler existed? Is it because of videotape? No. Or photographs? That's why? No. Because it's a successive mass narration, meaning so many people witnessed his existence and then conveyed to another generation, who conveyed to another generation. Each generation is too large to have conspired to a lie. From the first generation that witnessed the event until now, there is no way for a person to deny the existence of Hitler. If Hitler's existence were a hoax, then that would be supernatural, because the successive mass narration is definitively true. Yani, rather, let me say, because it's normally impossible for a successive mass narration to be false. It's normally impossible for a successive mass narration to be false. What does normally impossible mean? Normally impossible means that for it to happen would be supernatural. Like how prophets do miracles. Miracles are normally impossible. Would a person point at the moon and then the moon breaks into pieces? No. Or would a person throw a staff onto the ground and then it transforms into a dragon? No. This is normally impossible. For the normally impossible to occur would be supernatural. And we learned that Jesus, his existence is a successive mass narration. They really existed. And Moses too. And their miracles. This means we don't just know about the miracles of Jesus and Moses from the Bible. Those miracles are reported until today, from their time until today. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said a hadith, and that hadith spread as a successive mass narration. That means, by virtue of being mutawatir, it is definitively true, authentic. That is. I'm not talking about the interpretation of the words. I'm talking about the confirmation of the words, not the interpretation. So this is definitively true report. So why denying it is not blasphemy, it's wording, for what I already told you. Even though it's a successive mass narration, still it is worded by fallible people. And another version could have another wording. Another version of the report could have another wording, and another version of the report could have a third wording. What is blasphemy is to believe that the Prophet said something and then to deny it, alayhi salatu wassalam. So there's two different things. Denying a hadith is not equivalent to contradicting the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Contradicting the Prophet is blasphemy, and in fact, this is the source of all blasphemy. This is the essence of all blasphemy. All blasphemy returns back to contradicting the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa ala alihi wasallam. So when would a person blaspheme concerning a hadith? The Shaykh tells us, He would blaspheme for denying its meaning if it were something known in the religion by necessity, like denying the torture of the grave. So it's not blasphemy to deny the wording of this hadith or that hadith, but denying the torture of the grave broadly, abstractly, that's blasphemy. Because the meaning is known in the religion by necessity. This meaning, yani, that there's torture of the grave, is known in the religion by necessity. And it's mutawatir, yani. So, yani, known in the religion by necessity, denying what's known in the religion by necessity, the rule is that it's blasphemy. Being mutawatir means that it is definitively true. Let me give you an example. Some person denies that Allah can be seen. He says seeing God is impossible. We say to him, that's not true. God can be seen. If he removes from you what prevents you from seeing him, you would see him. He would say, no, if he could be seen, then he would be a body. Then we're going to say, oh, this guy's confused here. He doesn't have enough science to understand this issue mentally. So we're not going to deem him as a blasphemer on this level. So then we tell him, don't you know, Allah said, وُجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ نَاظِرَةٌ إِلَى رَبِّهَا نَاظِرَةٌ. Faces on that day that are brilliant, shining, the faces of the believers, seeing their Lord. So we will say to him, here in the Quran, it says seeing their Lord. He says, no, it doesn't mean seeing their Lord. It means they're waiting for the reward from their Lord. They're waiting for the endowment of their Lord. نَاظِرَةٌ إِلَى رَبِّهَا. إِلَى رَبِّهَا. This means the endowment of their Lord. نَاظِرَةٌ. They are waiting for it. So we're going to say, this one, he doesn't even understand this ayah. He thinks ila here is a noun, and ila here is a particle. He thinks nalzira means waiting, while nalzira means looking or seeing. He's mixed up here. He doesn't understand the ayah. In this way, we can't deem him as a kafir here at this level. And we would say to him, don't you know that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wasallam said, إنكم سترون ربكم يوم القيامة. For sure you shall see your Lord on resurrection day. Then that one would say, what? How could the Prophet say that? That's not true. Why would the Prophet say that? Because if Allah would be seen, he would be a body. You are telling me that the Prophet is saying that Allah is a body? I don't accept. I don't accept that this is a real hadith. So we can't deem him as a kafir here. So we're going to say, you are a misguided person who did not reach the level of blasphemy. The Shaykh says, that is contrary to someone who denies a single letter from the book of Allah obstinately, stubbornly. He blasphemes even if his denial does not corrupt the meaning. Yeah, that's clear. Denying even a single letter, one letter of the Quran is blasphemy. Even if what he denied or removed does not corrupt the meaning. He says, rahimahullah, there are 50 successive mass narrated hadiths, according to what some said, and others have said otherwise. Yani. So, according to a saying, there's 50 mutawatir hadiths. That's a little bit of hadiths compared to all the hadiths there are. Yani, one of those hadith books that you know, Bukhari, Muslim, and otherwise, they have thousands of hadiths in there, thousands. Any one of them has thousands of hadiths in it. So what's 50 hadiths in comparison to thousands? One of those books would have thousands. So then bring Al-Bukhari, Muslim, and another, and another, and another, and another, and another, and another, and another. So that's only a little bit of hadiths. So then, if only 50 hadiths are mutawatir, what are the other ones? Those are called ahad. That's with two extended vowels. Ahad. This means, the word itself means individuals. Ahad means individuals. So there's two categories of hadiths, mutawatir and ahad. Successive mass report and the reports of individuals. The reports of individuals are broken into three categories. Gharib, the report of a single individual, of a loner. The report of a loner. Then Aziz, the report of at least two at every level. The report of at least two at every level. That does not mean two people narrated it from two people who narrated it from two people who narrated it from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No. And some scholars said that scenario doesn't even exist. Rather, at least two at every level have narrated this hadith. So it means the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told, let's say, two people something. Then, from these two, maybe each one of them told someone, so then that's two at the next level. Or maybe each one of them told two. One of them told two, the other one told two. So that means this next level has four. So this is called Aziz. Aziz is when there is at least two reporters at every level. And then there's Mashhur. Mashhur is the narration of at least three. But without reaching successive mass report. At least three, so three or more, but not reaching the level of successive mass report. So these three categories, Gharib, Aziz, and Mashhur, those are all Ahad, reports of individuals. As long as the reports don't reach the level of Tawatur, they are reports of individuals. And besides a Mutawatir report, so Mutawatir report is always authentic. Always 100% of the time authentic. But the reports of individuals are not intrinsically authentic. We need to research them to be sure that they are bona fide hadiths. And the scholars, they have rules that they established concerning what a hadith can be used for. Like in the creed, the hadith must be authentic in the creed. Some of them said has to be mashhur, narrated by at least three. Along with being authentic, needs to be mashhur. Some of them said, no, it definitely needs to be authentic, but does not have to be mashhur. Just needs to be authentic by consensus. Could be the report of a lone individual, but authentic by consensus. If so, then it could be evidence for the creed. Others, they said, no, that's not enough. Needs to be from at least three and authentic. The Hanafis are the ones who said at least three. And since we are talking about denying a hadith, then what's the case of the hadith deniers? They call themselves the Quranists or Al-Quraniyun. I call them hadith deniers. Are they blasphemers or not? And we need to look into their case, each one by one. If the case of one of them is that he deems the Muslims at large as misguided, then he's a kafir. Because deeming the nation at large as misguided is blasphemy. And also, if as a result of his denial, he denies some matters that are known in the religion by necessity, such as the 5 prayers, it is famous about hadith deniers that they say there's only 3 obligatory prayers. This is blasphemy. Those ones, if you were to ask them, how can you deny the hadiths? How do you make istinja if you don't take the hadiths? You would say, one of them would say, I don't need someone to tell me how to wipe my blank in this disrespectful way. I'm conveying to you like what they say. They lack scholarship. They're just argumentative people, and they want to misguide Muslims. I came across a community of them some years ago. An online community of hadith deniers. These guys were major trolls. And they were like picking on Muslims. Because a lot of Muslims didn't really know how to answer a lot of what they were saying. Then I went in there and I started arguing with them and then kind of turned the tables on them. And I learned from them with all of what they do. Yani, I stuck in there. I stayed in there. I trolled them until I learned all of their stuff, all of their arguments and everything. And if you ask them, well, how do you get married then? You don't use the hadiths. How do you get married? They say, if it's not in the Quran, we don't need to know how. So what kind of answer is that? Okay, according to you, you don't need to know how. So then how do you do it? You don't get married, or you do anything you want to do? What's your procedure for marriage? And then how do you prove that? So I don't know what they're going to say to that. Maybe they say, we do any way we want to do because we didn't find any definitive rules about it in the Quran. The evidence for the creed needs to be from the hadiths. So I'm talking about hadiths here. The evidence for the creed needs to be sahih, authentic. Some said needs to be mashhur also, not just authentic, but mashhur, at least 3 narrators at every level. Why? So to remove that or to lessen that room for error. If we say, no, it could be even narrated by a loner, as long as it's authentic by consensus. What's an example of a hadith that's not authentic by consensus? The hadith of the slave girl. The one narrated by Imam Muslim. That hadith is not authentic by consensus, that's for sure. A Wahhabi would even lie to you and tell you the hadith of the slave girl is mutawatir. I heard that lie before. I was talking to an Arab. Arab Wahhabis are so dishonest. Because they have more capabilities to be dishonest because of the language. So I talked to him. He said to me, I see you memorize. MashaAllah. So the hadith of the slave girl is not evidence for the creed, only for an anthropomorphist, a Wahhabi, or a Wahhabi type of person. For halal and haram, to know something is halal or haram or obligatory, then the hadith needs to be acceptable. It needs to be acceptable. Not weak, not weak. And when it comes to mentioning the good merits of people and encouraging good deeds and explaining some ayat of the Quran, it is possible to use a weak hadith for any of those. Any question?